Hello, everybody, and happy Thursday. My name is Kenny. I am the founder of STR Insights. Many of you watching probably already know that, but I just thought I'd introduce myself again. Today, we are going to be talking about investing in emerging short-term rental markets during a potential recession. The past 2 weeks, we've had some great interviews. We had Tyler Kuhn on, and we talked about investing in popular vacation rental markets. And then we had last week we had Dave Minapace on, and we talked about investing in like uncommon markets. And the interesting thing is when we walked away from each of those calls, we were able to really identify certain attributes and characteristics of all of those, what makes those markets special, that Tyler's in or Dave's in, and be able to actually pinpoint other markets out in the country that have those similar attributes and characteristics that you potentially could invest in as well. Because yes, each of those markets, Western North Carolina is unique to itself. Massachusetts and the Maine coast is very unique, but there are other places in the country that are doing just as well in terms of ROI and have similar characteristics that we can go out and target. And so if you haven't watched those, I encourage you to go back. You can find them on our social media page or on YouTube. Also, I'm going to throw this out here, a shameless plug. Guys, I have a podcast out with Bill Faith. It's called STR-onomics. We just dropped some really cool, well, it'll come out this month. We just dropped some really cool bombs and nuggets on certain amenities that you need for 2023. And so I spent a lot of time and a lot of data, like looking through the data, several hours to put that one together. And so I just want to encourage you guys, if you haven't had a chance to check that out. So today we're going to talk about emerging markets, short-term rental markets. So this is different than necessarily uncommon short-term rental markets, because one of the attributes of uncommon short-term rental markets that we discussed about was that they have been historical, like meaning that they've been around for many, many years and decades. We know as of recently, there are several emerging short-term rental markets that we haven't really talked about or heard of until the last decade or so. And so one of these markets is Branson, Missouri. Branson, I'll let the expert come in and tell us more about Branson, but from what I've seen data-wise, I mean, it really just kind of popped up onto the radar as of the last few years, personally for me, and hearing people talk about it and investing on it, and it's just exploded. I learned recently that like 9 million people go there a year. And anyway, I mean, it's in Southwest Missouri / kind of Northwest Arkansas area too. I mean, it's kind of a region, and it obviously is a town called Branson, but the area that we're going to be talking about in particular. And it's definitely emerged as this established STR market. So I'm going to bring in the professional for that area, Ryan Duffy. So guys, give you a little background on Ryan. So him along with his wife, Shay, they own Duffy Homes Realty and Ozark Mountain Vacations. So he's a real estate broker, licensed home builder, interior designer, manages STRs, owns STRs. He builds them. He goes into when I first met Ryan and Shay, I was asking them about regulations in those areas, and they were just like, yeah, we're at the meetings. We know what's going on. We know the who's who. So he knows these areas. And what I really want to pull from Ryan and kind of, I'll be sharing data with him and we're going to be talking about it. But what I really want to pull from his is his expertise so we can truly identify what makes an emerging market. Because there are some, I'll call them poser emerging markets out in the country right now that have done well because of COVID. But it's kind of, we're noticing that maybe they're going to fall off after COVID and go back to what they were before. And so, what makes up some of these emerging markets that will stay strong ever since, maybe COVID or pre-COVID and continue upwards. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring in Ryan.
Hey, Kenny, thanks for the introduction.
Yep. Sorry, it was like a little bit longer than I wanted, but anyway, so Ryan, welcome. Let's start out. Let's talk first about, let's just dive straight into Branson. I was kind of already touching on it. I'm just like, you know what, let's go into Branson. So tell us about Branson, Missouri. What's the draw there? What's the appeal? Why do 9 million people a year go to Branson?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a lot of different answers to it. Honestly, so Shay and I vacationed down here for 10 years before we decided to move to the area, and honestly, for us, in the 10 years we came here, we went to Branson like twice. Like, we were here for the area, and you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned, it kind of floating into Northwest Arkansas and all that. Like, we've got a great system of lakes here. They're clean. They're, great fishing, recreational lakes, all that. But then also like the rivers, the streams, the mountains. There's just a lot of stuff to do here. So the draw to Branson is you've got all that natural beauty, all the natural attractions, but then Branson itself has all the stuff that you look for in a vacation. You go down the Branson Strip, you see a lot of the same stuff you'd see in Panama City Beach, Sevierville. Dolly Parton has a big presence here. Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum, all that kind of stuff. So you've got all the common tourist traps that people like to do with their kids. You go on vacation, let's go go-karting, let's go on the Ferris wheel. But then you've got all this other stuff here too that it's just a great place to be. And that's what drove us here. We moved here from Chicago 6-7 years ago almost now, and it was just a place we wanted to be and to raise our kids. And I think that's a big draw to people coming here as well, is they just enjoy spending their time here. And we're so close to so many different major population centers. I think the driving force we get between 9.5 and 10.5 million visitors a year, I think is the average that we're at now. But we're within a one-day drive of half the U.S. population.
And that's kind of what I wanted to ask you. I mean, we're talking Southwest Missouri, and frankly, really the not to say this is because of the show, but I mean, the only time I really heard of Southwest Missouri was Ozark.
Yeah, we get that a lot. The Netflix show kind of painted us in a weird light,
Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, they make it sound like this like redneck place out there, but then you start looking at the houses and the properties and people who are going out there, and it's actually like this really nice vacation area. So you're saying you're like a day's drive from half the population. Where are the major tourist, I guess, cities who are feeding the tourism into Branson?
Well, actually, an interesting statistic I heard yesterday that I wasn't really aware of was Northwest Arkansas. So if you look at, and when I say Northwest Arkansas, I mean like Fayetteville, Bentonville, Rogers, kind of the Walmart world headquarters hub. That area has doubled in population in the last 10 years. So there's a lot of people there. Before yesterday, I would have told you, and this is still true, to a great degree, I feel like Dallas, Fort Worth, Central and South Illinois, Kansas City, Oklahoma City, St. Louis, all of those are 8 hours or less away. Oklahoma City is 5 hours, Kansas City is 3 hours. So just a lot of different metropolitan areas that are, just a close drive away from the lake and from all the attractions.
Sure, that makes sense. So what are the properties like there? You're saying lake. It's also hilly too, I'm assuming, somewhat mountainous. So like, what are the properties typically like there?
It's definitely a mixed bag. So if you're looking at, short-term rental properties specifically, and you're looking at the Branson area, I'd say more than half the inventory is condo. So Branson and Southwest Missouri in general is pretty well regulated for short-term rentals. That started back in 2018 is when they started bringing in county restrictions. And as a result of that, a lot of the inventory that we already had before short-term rentals became really popular, like super popular the last few years, was kind of centralized into the condominium thing. And then once they brought in the restrictions, it stopped people from being able to go like they do in a lot of other markets and just buy up homes and turn them into vacation rentals, So the development over the last few years has been very kind of controlled and in centralized locations, So it is very much a mixed bag when you look at the vacation rentals, because you've got a sprinkling of like standalone single family homes. And then you've got a whole bunch of condos, and then a whole bunch of new construction lodges that are pretty well on top of each other because they're being zoned condo with no lot line separation for the most part. That's what the vast majority of the new construction inventory is. But then if you start going down south into Arkansas, and you mentioned the regulation part of it, a lot of Arkansas is unregulated at the moment. And actually that's where Shay and I live, is Omaha, Arkansas. It's about 20 minutes south of Branson. And it's kind of like the Wild West down there to a degree. We've got no planning and zoning. There's no permitting process. There's no inspection process on any level. for the most part, other than septic under construction. But so when you get down in there, you can pick up a house, and some of them are lakefront, some of them are just mountainous views, but down there, there's really no inventory, so that's where that's where as everything's been very popular over the last couple of years, and some markets have maybe gotten saturated. You probably know better than I would. I'm just kind of really focused on this market, but we haven't really had the opportunity to become saturated in this area because you couldn't, unless you were building as fast as you can. You've got to have a piece of land that's unregulated, or fit into that mold with the regulations that are in place on the Southwest Missouri side.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to jot some notes down that you're saying, because you're touching on, if guys, as you listen through, he's hitting on what are those key attributes or characteristics of these emerging markets that we find. And so I'll summarize them at the end from what I'm hearing. But let's go a little bit further. I guess I should have asked you at the very beginning to make sure but what is the history of the short-term rental market in Branson? Like, how long has it really been around? Have people been going there forever? Is it just recent? Like, what's the deal?
It's always been a tourist town. I think it's evolved over the last, I'd say 10 or 15 years, So growing up, when I'd hear about Branson, I would kind of equate it to just like a show town, right? I've heard people call it Christian Vegas. People come here to go taking shows, but there's no gambling and there's not a whole lot of drinking on the streets. So it's so that's been kind of the historical, feel of Branson. It's had a lot of great draws with the shows and the music and all that. But then I feel like over the last 10 years or so, it's gone through a bit of a rebranding. So Branson, just over the last few years, has made a really big push to become a Christmas destination. So not only are people coming here, during lake season and during, just summer vacation season in general, but, we've noticed a huge uptick over the last couple of years. We'll slow down a little bit in end of August, early September when the kids go back to school. But then towards the end of September into October, our occupancy is back up, 70+%, because people are coming here for the rest of the year to take in the Christmas attractions. So there's a whole bunch of different Christmas light displays and living nativity plays and all that kind of thing. And then along with that is all the new development that's going on in the area. So I was mentioning to you before the show started, a couple of the big movers and shakers in our region, and they've got some just high end resorts and like day resorts. One of them's called Top of the Rock. It's attached to Big Cedar Resort, but it's it's just south of Branson. It's just a really cool place to go. It's beautiful. It's got these stunning western exposure lake views and these golf cart tours you can take, over canyons and through caves and all that. And it's just a really, really cool attraction. And then along with that, we've got this big ATV park that's coming in that's going to open on the first of the year. And then a big amphitheater that just opened as well over the summer. And they're still in the process of adding on to it, but from the plans that they made public, they're projecting to have like a 50,000 seat amphitheater that's situated on the lake just south of Branson. And we had our first big show just a couple months ago, I think October. It was a Garth Brooks show that completely brought traffic to a standstill. The infrastructure is still building up to be able to handle that, but it was pretty cool to have that in our area.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's crazy. I mean, that's excellent though. It's still growing and just exploding. I mean, has it slowed at all since interest rates have risen and things, or do you kind of still see it expanding and growing?
Yeah, no, all the construction and all the expansion on the development side seems to be progressing forward. And what we've noticed as the interest rates started ticking up was things did slow down dramatically for a few weeks, couple months, something like that. But then I feel like after a couple of rate hikes, people just kind of looked at it and said, okay, I guess stuff's just more expensive now. And we did notice, like, we don't have quite the number of investor buyers as we did, say, 6 months ago. But the volume of sales we're doing is still approximately the same, which is kind of an interesting change that we've noticed. So we're not, a lot of people, I think, that we're just kind of putting their toe in the water, and money was free for a long time, essentially 2-3% interest. A lot of those people that maybe were just on the threshold of being able to afford a vacation rental, now they're out of the market. They're paying 6.5-7.5%. They're just not playing the game anymore. What we've noticed is a lot of cash buyers, a lot of 1031 buyers, and frankly, a rise in joint venture partnerships too. Shay and I are involved in one right now with a couple of other investors, and we're building up a small resort. And I've had a bunch of people that I'm working with come to me kind of with the same situation. They're like, you know what, interest rates are high. I can't do this on my own anymore. But I've got all these people in my pipeline that want to invest with me, so we'll just pool our funds together. So that's been kind of an interesting dynamic. So again, as far as sales volume, like it hasn't really dropped, and the average prices aren't going down in our market. So it's just been kind of interesting to watch the data and see where it's going. If anything, I think we're coming back, at least in my opinion. I feel like the Branson, Southwest Missouri, North Arkansas market is kind of stabilizing to more of a sustainable market atmosphere, which is fantastic. I think.
Yeah, no, that's I've noticed more investors on social media are kind of going to the area to check it out, see what's this deal in Arkansas or Missouri areas. What was it, Buena Vista? Is that how you say it? The area just Buena Vista. Yeah, I mean I've seen that too popping up. What we talked a little bit about it before. We said it in front of this audience, but what kind of growth are, like, who's coming to those areas? Not just Branson, but just really Northwest Arkansas area. What's going on there?
Yeah, so I mean, on an investment level, for the short-term rental side of things, again, it just kind of goes back to, I think, the proximity to major population hubs. But another driving factor for the overall growth pattern of our area, which has been an interesting thing that's happened, I think, as a direct result of COVID, is a lot of the people that are moving here residentially wouldn't have had it not been for the paradigm shift that happened after COVID, and people realizing, the value of being out in nature and the value of or the ability to work remotely to a certain degree. Our bread and butter has always been, vacation rental investors, but we do quite a bit of residential as well. And I had several people over the last couple of years tell me, I wouldn't have moved to Omaha, Arkansas until I was retired. But, I haven't been to my office in Austin, Texas in 6 months. So why am I paying Austin property taxes? So right. That was a big driving factor for us too, coming out of Chicago. I mean, it was before COVID and it was different circumstances. But when we came down here, and again, this is a place we just like to be, a place we pictured ourselves raising our kids. One of the trips we took, we just kind of were just casually looking at real estate. We're like, man, this 1.5 acre piece of land with this beautiful view next to the lake, it's $400 a year in property taxes. Like, it's like, I can deliver pizzas and pay this mortgage if I had to. And that was literally the conversation we had. We uprooted and just changed both of our careers to come here and just had to figure it out on the fly. So I think, but moving forward, I think that's another big driving factor. People aren't just buying here to invest. They're buying here because they want to be here. And a lot of the investors that we work with, they're purchasing these properties so that they can cash flow it and pay it off and then move into it. So I think that really helps our area overall too. It's not just one usage type that people are investing for; it's multiple.
Yeah, that I like that a lot. It's almost, it'd be considered like a lifestyle asset market, right?
Mm-hmm.
People.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's
where they want to, either retire or eventually just live one day. So I think that's really cool. Let's talk about some of the data, because I think a lot of people want to know. And guys, if you have questions, please put them in the comments and we'll answer them kind of as we go. But let's look at the data. Branson stands out in STR Insights as a really good market. The average ROI is 16%, which is pretty high for one, a lake market, and two, a big, large, popular market. You don't really see that in a lot of the popular ones. They're definitely less than 15%. So that stands out. So, it just looks more affordable than a lot of other like really popular destination markets that have the same number of rentals. So can you maybe elaborate on as to the affordability of that market and how that's kind of changed over the last few years? I'm sure it was like nothing, plots of land before, and now it's different. But yeah, let's elaborate upon that.
Yeah, so it's changed a lot in the last couple of years, just like I think every investment market has, and even kind of looking at it from a localized point of view, I remember talking to clients like a year ago, like, oh man, that's way overpriced. That's doubled in price in the last year. And then I look at it again, look at it from a national scale, and it's like, I guess we're not that overpriced, So a lot of the buyers that we're getting now, I'd say over the last year or so, they're people that are selling in other markets that have become very pricey, and they're doing 1031s and coming over here. So yeah, as far as affordability goes, I think on a national scale, yeah, we're still very affordable. But if you look at our average sale price for any asset class here over the last couple of years, it's raised dramatically. But there's still room to invest, and one of the things that's kind of strange too is, with real estate, traditionally people say it's always cheaper to buy existing than to build new, right? With real estate in the short-term rental market, at least here, it almost seems like it's the other way around. We're seeing some turnkey units that are performing and ready to go, selling between $300 and $400 a square foot. But you can go and build one, even when lumber was still astronomical 6 months ago. You could build one for $225, $250 a square foot, and then have a brand new asset that, it's, you don't have to worry about all the maintenance issues and all that kind of stuff. So we've had a lot of clients that have done new construction projects over the last couple of years. And it's been fascinating to see, like, they'll go under contract for X amount for this 5-bedroom. And then by the time it's almost done, not even done and furnished, by the time it's almost done, they've got $200,000 in equity, which is mind blowing. And I've talked to some investors in other parts of the country that have experienced kind of the same thing, but it seems to be just over and over again. Like, yeah, it's crazy. If you take the risk to take out that build loan and you pay those interest payments for 9 or 12 months or longer, depending on the builder, you really stand to generate quite a bit of equity at the back end because there's so little inventory here. And I think that's been one of our saving graces, coming through COVID and then going into what 2023 is going to look like, is we're not saturated. We don't have thousands of units sitting on the market, and there has been a lot of new construction over the last couple of years. But I just ran an MLS search on it before I hopped on the call, because I didn't know the exact number. But between condos and single family homes, just in the short-term rental market, 408 units in the last 2 years. So, I mean, that's not a huge number considering we have 10 million people coming here every year.
Yeah.
So it's been a very, very controlled growth, which again, I think benefits us in the long run.
Is there the potential, do you think, down the road that it could be kind of like not too much growth, but too many, like how, like it could slow down, like there's just way too many houses because there's so much land available? Or is it kind of restricted, like landlocked or anything like that?
No, I mean, at least on the Missouri side. The Missouri side, I don't see that happening because the two major counties that encompass the popular Branson area, Stone and Taney, they're pretty heavily restricted. I mean, you can still operate within them, as long as you go by the guidelines and you buy by the proper zoning. But anything zoned R1 residential in either county is off limits. They're not even considering special use permits for those. So really, you have to be in a very particular class of zoning or get a special use permit approved by the county. And what we've noticed is, yeah, you can get those done if you're looking in the right areas. And we've kind of figured out the formula for how to figure out what area will get most likely approved for that. But, if you pick an area that's in a community, or even close to 2 or 3 other houses, part of that permitting process is a 30-day public notice to all the neighbors saying, hey, this guy's planning on doing a short-term rental, and here's the meeting, and here's the time. Like, show up if you have any concerns. And the people that get shot down are the ones that, their neighbors show up and they say, I don't want that in my backyard. And that's it. That's usually the end of the story. Like, if that permit doesn't go through. So I don't see that really reversing anytime in the long run. And then on the Arkansas side, it's all raw land, right? And there's only so much of it that I think is really, really great for this type of usage. I mentioned that I'm in Omaha, and that's where all of my short-term rentals are. Omaha's pretty big geographically, and I don't think most of it's conducive for short-term rentals. A lot of it's very rural, a lot of it's down dirt roads. There's only so much of it that is off pavement, close to Branson, close to the lake. And that the same thing applies for, I think, down the Buffalo National River area. There are some amazing opportunities down there, but Arkansas and Southwest Missouri in general, they're very rocky. So
Mm,
we don't have like the very pronounced mountains like you see in the Appalachians or the Rockies or anything like that. But you try to dig a hole out here anywhere, and it's just rock, right? So that's
right.
part of the big issue with trying to build around here is just logistically, like it's going to cost money to build a foundation, to do this, to do that, cut roads, to trench in water. So yeah, there's a lot of land in Arkansas that could be acquired at pretty affordable rates, but then find someone to build on it and figure out a way to get it close to pavement. That's the other thing. Like I think it's like 80% of county roads in Arkansas are dirt roads, and which it's not a big deal for a lot of people, but in a vacation rental market, that can be a deal breaker sometimes.
Right. Yeah, I believe that for sure. Yeah. Well, you could happens all the time. The guests, they'll rent the cheapest vehicle, a
Yeah,
Prius, and drive it out in the middle of a snowstorm and expect to make it up the road or whatever. So
yeah.
that makes sense. One thing I found interesting too is in looking in. We'll start with the Branson area first, and then we'll head to Arkansas. But the data. There are some properties that they just look like they're underperforming. And why is that? Compared, there's a wide range and a swing of or a wide variance, I should say, in terms of revenue of certain properties, even next to each other. So, what's the story there?
So a lot of these properties, they're used a lot personally, or they're direct booked a lot, right? So,
Gotcha.
even well, yeah, I mean, I've noticed the exact same thing. Whether it's using STR Insights or any of the other ones, you can see something that's doing just amazing occupancy, like 90% occupancy, and then you look at one that's very comparable, just a half mile away, and it's occupied 30% of the time or something stupid like that. And and digging a little deeper into the numbers, that tends to be what it is. Either it's just being completely mismanaged, which is usually not the case. Usually, a professional management company in the area is going to do a little better than that. But the most common scenario is that's someone's second home, right? And they just
Mm.
have it on Airbnb and Verbo so that they can cover the note on it and just break even or make a few bucks. So that's overwhelmingly what I've seen.
How are the property management companies? I see Evolve, I think Vacasa, there's maybe a few other ones. How do they perform there and do?
So the locally run management companies, I think there's several great ones. I've worked with some of those national companies you mentioned before on a personal and professional level, and I mean they don't necessarily, at least Evolve. Evolve I had two properties with for a while, and they're not local. They're out of what, Denver. So I had a couple instances where and I live very close to all my units, and I interacted with a couple of guests on a couple of different occasions, and they're like, yeah, I'm surprised that we're so close to the lake here. Valve told me I had to drive 20 minutes into Branson for the nearest boat launch. I'm like, we're 30 seconds from Cricket Creek Marina. Like, it's right here.
Yeah.
Like, they just don't know the properties, right? But there are several, and I don't want to point out anyone in particular because there's a whole bunch of great ones here in the area that are local, that know the area, that do the direct hands-on work with these units, and they do great. So there are options. Whether it's self-managing or if you want to be completely hands-off and have a property management company. The infrastructure here in the Branson area is fantastic for it. It's been here for a long time. There are plenty of cleaners, there are plenty of handymen. So I know that's one of the concerns, when you start looking at different emerging markets and being able to manage them properly and run them with all the needed assistance, from those different trades. But that infrastructure is here, and there's quite a bit to choose from.
Gotcha. Okay, so that makes sense. So if an outside investor is looking into Branson, they want someone to manage their property. I mean, besides obviously contacting you, but there are property management companies. Like it isn't just the wild west in terms of
Oh,
people trying to
absolutely.
run short term rentals, right? Like it's
Yeah.
still
Yeah, and most of our clients are remote owners, So and again, it's a mixed bag of self management and full service. But either route you want to go, there's plenty of options. And even for ourselves, like we live very close to and self manage our own, and we we manage a few for some other people on just a very small local scale. Like we're trying not to go more than like 2 miles from our house, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But even for us, like we can go months at a time without setting foot in our properties because we know that we've got the people here that we can trust that show up, and we see them come go on the blink cameras and all that. So it's easy to get the people in place that you need here for sure.
Okay, cool. Let's get into Arkansas. So Northwest Arkansas area. I see Jeff mentioned about the mountain bike mecca. I've heard about this. Can you elaborate? So let's answer Jeff's question. He asked, how much do you know about the new mountain bike mecca of the U.S.?
Yeah, down in Rogers and Bentonville and all that. They're building this massive network of mountain biking trails that connects Northwest Arkansas, honestly, over through the Buffalo River. And I don't know the specifics on it. I'm not a big mountain biker, but I've talked to a bunch of people that are just thrilled by it. So yeah, that whole area in Northwest Arkansas, like I was talking about basically Bentonville, the Walmart world headquarters, that's just doubled in population over the last 10 years. They're attracting a great demographic, a great earning class that's building up that whole area and developing outward from there. So there's talk of development that's connecting Northwest Arkansas to Branson also. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff to do down there aside from,
Is it a seasonal market? So like if you were, let's say, Jeff here, he loves mountain biking and he wants to invest, have a short-term rental near that. Is that a large enough traffic driver to?
Yeah, that's been one of the wild cards for a long time. And honestly, my whole attraction to looking at Northwest Arkansas between the Buffalo River and then that whole mountain biking mecca is just kind of lack of data, and not really knowing for sure how it would perform over time. But what I've seen, and we've got several clients under contract in that area right now, and the numbers are just mind blowing. I mean, some of these places are doing like 90% occupancy year round.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I think the potential is really there. If you ask me what the draw is, and we were talking to this point a little bit before we started on the show, like I can't really point to the data, right? Because it's not been around that long. When people
truly emerging, right?
Yeah, exactly, which is exciting. But at the same time, when I've got people asking questions about, whether it's Kingston, Ponca, Northwest Arkansas, they're like, what are the numbers? I'm like, sure. I kind of pull the data that I've got in front of me, but when they ask what the draw is, I'm like, well, it's pretty and it's close to a bunch of stuff, but you don't have the tourist attractions like you do in Branson. It just seems to really resonate with people, and people want to go there. So,
right. That's interesting. I've had a lot of people. I've had 2 or 3 people reach out to me about Jasper, Arkansas,
yeah,
and how. Hey, Kenny, we're not seeing a lot of numbers in STR Insights or really any data source about Jasper. What do you think of Jasper? And I know nothing about Jasper. So I go on there and I'm like, there's like 70, maybe 70 STRs in the like kind of area. I'm like looking at it on a map and I'm like, the biggest thing there is like a Dollar General in the town. I'm like why, what it is. And then I start researching Jasper and it's near the Buffalo River. And the Buffalo River has like estimated over 800,000 people there a year.
Yeah.
And so like, what is this place? Why is it special? I mean, it's a national river park. And I've seen some pictures on Google, but like why are people going there?
It's just beautiful. It's about an hour south of where I live, and we try to go out that way 2 or 3 times a year. We actually spent some time at a vacation rental a couple of months ago, just to spend some more time in the area because we hadn't ever spent the night there. Like we'd gone there for day trips and hiking and floating on the river and all that kind of stuff. But the Buffalo National River was the first river that was entered into the National Park Service, I think back in the early 70s. So it's all protected by the federal government. You can't develop it. You can't clear it. You can't put any motorized vehicles on the river. So it's just all canoes and kayaks. Every bit of it you can fish and swim and camp on. And the topography is just mind-blowingly beautiful. I mean, it's all kinds of huge bluffs and scenic overviews, and it's just a pretty place to be. So there's countless trails you can hike with waterfalls, and there's thousands of caves all over the place around here. So that's
Mhm.
another cool thing that's drawing people, I think. And again, being close to all these major population centers. So, Northwest Arkansas with, millions of people in that large geographical area is, 30 minutes to an hour straight west of there. But also it seems to get a lot of traffic from North Texas. So a lot of demographic from over there. And that was another interesting thing, just kind of rambling on about caves in the area. And you might be able to see some data from this on your end, but one of the highest performing vacation rentals in Arkansas, it might be the highest performing. It's a cave that has a 3-bedroom house built into it, and
Whoa.
yeah, it's
That's
called
cool.
the Beckham Creek Cave Lodge. And this thing's just blown my mind ever since I first saw it. I was watching one of the Netflix specials on Airbnbs, and this popped up, and they're like, "Yeah, this is North Arkansas." I'm in North Arkansas. Like, where the heck is this? I look it up. It's like an hour south of me, and it's a 3-bedroom house. They're getting $2,200 a night on this thing, and it's booked up for like a year and a half straight at any given time.
Wow.
So I mean, just nuts. So I've mentioned that to a few different clients. I'm like, find me a cave. I'm like, how do I find a cave?
Yeah.
That's a whole process.
A limestone. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you look it up, I mean, it's nuts. Like, it's got a private helicopter pad. It's got a couple hundred acres, so you can bring ATVs and horses and stuff. But it's a real cave. Like, you walk into the living room and there's like active water like going dripping from the ceiling and all this, and it's kind of nuts. It's cool.
Wow. That's really cool. So I guess it kind of, I mean, like Michelle in the comments said, we live in Bentonville and prices have gone through the roof.
Yeah,
I would live there, but we wouldn't own an STR. And when you look at the data for some of these areas like Bentonville and parts of Northwest Arkansas, it's not as good as say Branson.
Mhm.
And then when people ask me about Jasper and some of these other areas, there's just not enough data to really, give a sound advice. In fact, I really believe that area is like at the early stages of emerging
Yeah,
into the STR world. I think that the prices will continue to go up in kind of all of Northwest Arkansas, especially as they're constantly adding these things and really bringing in those people. Am I going to personally go and invest today into that? Probably not, just based on my circumstances. I would look more towards Branson, that's a little more established and kind of in that has good historical growth over the last few years. But for people who do go and invest in, say, a Jasper or around those areas, I'd say they're very like it's an early stage investor. And there's,
yeah.
if you're willing to take on that kind of risk, there can be high reward, but also there's a high amount of risk. So keep that in mind for anybody interested in those kind of parts. Now Bentonville, on the other hand, that's a different story. Up in those areas, Buena Vista, that they've kind of been around for a while. Eureka Springs is up there too. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. That's it's just straight west of us, more or less. About an
So,
hour west.
yeah, what's your experience with Eureka Springs? I mean, the numbers aren't, from what I see, aren't super great. But
It's a
people
really
talk.
cool town. It's a really cool town. It's got a lot of culture. It's got a lot of restaurants. It's just a cool place to hang out. But it's restricted. I mean, they put in restrictions in town, I think
Mm,
last year or something like that. So you can't buy anything in town and make it an STR anymore. And then the surrounding area is very rural. So I've talked to a few different clients that own properties around there. They seem to do pretty well, but they seem to be a little bit more seasonal than what we see in the Branson area. And it's down it's a big attraction for a lot of different demographics. It gets a lot of motorcycle traffic through there. But it seems to, from the data I've seen, it seems to drop off a bit in the winter, whereas like the Branson market, we've got like a solid 10-month season. The only months that were slow is January and February, which is fantastic. There's something to do year round here. So yeah, I think Eureka is great. And I've had a bunch of clients express interest in it. I've got a couple clients that own in that area, but it does seem to be quite a bit more seasonal than being closer to Branson. You start.
yeah, and we had somebody mention here that they've got some heavy restrictions. So
Mhm.
there might, I don't, I'll have to look to see what those are. But that's very interesting. Okay, all right, we've kind of talked about that, Southwest Missouri. Yeah, somebody's saying that Eureka Springs shuts down in the winter, so
Yeah,
seasonality. So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Like there's parts of that whole area, that whole region that are just doing really well. Parts that are like kind of they've crested and starting to head back down, and I'd say parts of Arkansas, and then there's parts in Arkansas that are just kind of blowing up, and people are asking about it and getting excited about it, and so I think that's it. To me, there's some opportunity there somewhere. You got to pick the right location and everything, but but you have options, and it's very diverse. So let's kind of zoom out and talk on more of a national level. I'm not going to say, hey, what other markets? Because that's fine. Your markets, but I want to highlight some of the things I wrote down from what you said about what makes a good emerging market, STR market. I think one thing that you touched on, and I mean, would you agree, is that regulation that kind of restricts the possibility of having of saturation in that market plays a huge role in market growth, especially for STRs.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's kind of a double-edged sword, because a lot of people that come into the Branson market at first, it seems, they can be kind of frustrated, like, because they'll start on Zillow or whatever, and like, I found this great lake house. Like, yep, doesn't work, can't do it, and they get frustrated. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword in that front. It's frustrating because you can't just pick out whatever home you want and do it. But on the opposite side, it's the devil, right? Like, we already have restrictions. We know what they are. We know what the rules are, right? If you go to a market that's completely unrestricted, that scares a lot of people off. There's a market in central Illinois that I was looking at, last year. That's a popular tourist destination. It's got a state park. It's very popular for people out of Chicago, but they were unrestricted, and like something like 100 something units got built up specifically for vacation rental. And then last spring, the city council just said, nope, this is the problem. Shut it down. And they didn't grandfather anybody in. They didn't allow any variance. They just put, 100 properties out of business, essentially. So a lot of people I talk to on a national level, they're looking to invest here. They're more or less comforted by the fact that we have some level of restrictions, because otherwise there's always that risk that whatever jurisdiction having authority, whether it's the city, the county, the state, whatever, they can come in and just say, nope, this is the problem. We're shutting it down. So I think it's good, for a number of different reasons, just to make sure the growth is somewhat moderated, and then also just to have that assurance that we all know the rules we need to play by.
Yeah, I love that. And in fact, I tell a lot of people, what's more dangerous than a market that's overregulated? A market that's underregulated, had no regulation at all, because it's just a matter of time. I mean, unless you're out in a county in the middle of nowhere, every other major destination that has STRs, it's going to have some sort of restrictions at some point or the other. Doesn't matter how red the state is or red the town, like, they're going to do something, because something's going to happen, and make somebody upset, and and then so on. So when we're looking, we need to look for these kind of markets that have that established regulation already, because that protects us as STR investors, and hedges some of our risk. We don't have to worry necessarily about that. We know that these cities, there's a low chance that they're just going to wipe STRs out. They're not going to say nope, because they're getting tax money and benefit from this. And they're happy. They've won. They've got something in place that works for them. And they're less likely to change that. I know that for sure, because I'm in New York, and we have some of the stupidest restrictions I've ever seen in my life. I had to file a environmental impact report, not building a house, just purchasing a house that's been around for over 100 years already, just to get an STR permit. But once I got it. And it scares like 50% of the other investors away, just simply because that has to be done. And that's why I love regulation, and I love that it's established. And that's what we really need to look for in some of these new markets.
Yeah. And the purpose to a lot of the regulations in our area, I mean, some of them are kind of goofy, and some of them are just, they're trying to figure out what they're doing with planning and zoning here locally, right? But I think the main purpose is to protect residential housing. So at the onset of it, it was, okay, you can't do anything zoned R1. Well, if you look at what an R1 zone property is, it's usually in a subdivision. So I know I don't want to vacation in a subdivision. I don't want to own a vacation rental in a subdivision, and I wouldn't want to live next to one, right? So that makes sense. So I mean, as long as everyone's playing by those rules and you get the meaning behind them, I mean, it's all kind of logical, right? So
Yeah, no, that's I love that. A couple other things that you said that were really good to help like kind of underline emerging market is the fact that a good emerging market, I should say, is that there's more than just one major traffic driver, at least
Mhm.
in the Branson area. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much to do in that area besides just go to the lake. We don't have to cover everything again, but I thought that was interesting, and then the fact that you said they're trying to build up the Christmas time, like I love that. In one of the markets I'm in at Watkins Glen, there's like 30 wineries within a 15-20 minute drive of us. And
Nice.
so October, so the main season for us is like middle of April to the end of September. That's the summer season. There's a NASCAR stadium. So there's races, there's a state park that's like 1 million people go there a year, and everybody's there for that. But then at the end of September, it starts getting cold and chilly, and there's not really a whole lot to do. They stop the races and everything. And so what do people do? They go to the wineries. We have all these people going to wineries, and that almost every weekend or every weekend is just groups going to wineries.
Hmm.
And that extends our season all the way until about December, this time of the year when it just kind of drops off. And so I love that with Branson. What you're saying with the Christmas stuff is that they've extended that season knowing that they can get more people there. And so that helps out. So it becomes, instead of a 2 or a 3, possibly, I mean, you mentioned it's pretty much a 4-season market almost, right?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. The only downtime we have is January and February. And even that, you get a sprinkling of bookings depending on what type of property you have. So it just kind of depends on what you've got.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I love that when the cities try to do more and there's just more in the area to extend the traffic and the demand. Another thing too that you mentioned is that Branson's been growing before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Like it
Yeah.
was it was on the map before. And I think that, and this is where I had mentioned before, kind of the poser emerging markets and markets that aren't necessarily, they looked really good the last 3 years because of COVID. And now they're starting to really take massive dips in revenue by, 30, 20, 30, even 40%, some of the properties and locations. And so, I mean, from your experience, are you seeing that kind of dip in revenue this
No.
coming year?
No, I mean, I am seeing, depending on what asset class you have, depending on what type of property it is and how it's being run and how it's furnished and all that. Some people that have kind of the cookie cutter, the same thing as everybody else, they're seeing a dip, but I don't think the dip is really, I don't think it's really indicative of what our normal market environment is, right? So like
Right.
that, like everything was just insane, right? Everyone was booked all the time.
Yep.
And now what we're seeing is if you've got something that you're running really well, that's got really good amenities, that's pretty, that's close to everything, we're having a record year. And one of my clients I talked to, he said he's up 20% over last year. But then I talked to some people that, that may have just gotten into it relatively recently, and they've got something very similar to, 600 other people in that development. And they're seeing like a 15 to 20% drop in revenue and occupancy. And when you start digging into it a little bit, like that seems to be the determining factor, and kind of the same thing that, that Bill Faith is always, mentioning on and everything. Like you need to be better than the competition because the gold rush is over, it's done.
Mhm.
Like you need to actually put some work into your rental and make sure you've got a product that is really appealing when it's up against 600 others. They're just like it.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's important to just say this, like everybody should, unless you're that own that house in the cave, everybody should expect a dip, some sort of dip, at some sort of percentage level. Overall, at least in their market, maybe their house is super unique and, there's always these exceptions, but overall, all markets will see some sort of dip. But depending on the characteristics of that market, with the regulation, the saturation, the traffic drivers, all these other factors in place, how much that it can impact how much of a dip that'll be. And it'll actually, like areas like Branson, it'll mitigate that dip. So it'll kind of keep it at like it hits and then goes back up again. And that's really what I expect to see in some of these areas, just because there are so many people going to them and there's so many traffic drivers and the supply is limited.
Yeah.
We're still seeing demand increase. So that's I don't want to, I'm not like Airbnb. I'm not going to just say, if somebody was like, well, when Airbnb puts out their revenue numbers, we'll see really how the market's doing. And it's like, Airbnb shows you what they want to show you, like don't use that as like the metric. But but looking at the demand, it is still going up all across the country, but certain markets are still seeing like a greater increase in demand than others. And the Branson area is one of them. We got a question here for you, Ryan. So, can you touch on what area, I guess, STR areas are welcomed and easily permitted? So, is it just the zoning? So, I'm looking at Branson. Should I be looking for R1 zoning? How do I know? Do I need to call you to find out? Like, what do I need to do?
Absolutely. Yes, I'm the only resource in the area.
There you go.
Get with your realtor, get with your agent. If you're doing your own independent research, it's really hard doing it through Zillow or Realtor or anything like that. And a lot of these, so Stone and Taney County are the two main municipalities, county jurisdictions that have authority over here and do the restrictions on short-term rentals. So between the two, Taney seems much more restrictive than Stone. Stone does allow special use permits applications anyways for RR1, rural residential. And then if you've got anything that's zoned agricultural or commercial, obviously it's fine. But then also you need to talk to the county fire marshals. And if you're in Branson itself and Taney County, that's a lot more difficult. And there's a little bit of back and forth going right now in regards to who needs fire suppression and who doesn't. So I've had several clients tell me that they bought something in Taney County in Branson city limits, and they're being told that they need to retrofit the house with fire suppression sprinklers. Completely cost prohibitive. That's insane. If you're doing it new construction, it's not that big of a deal. But if you have to go in and rip out all the sheetrock and replumb everything and put it all back up, then you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars, presumably.
Easily.
So between the two, there's areas that are pre-zoned. There's areas that you don't need permits because they're already active vacation rentals in like resort type settings. But if you're looking for something that you can convert into a vacation rental, and honestly, that's their highest potential for ROI. And that's what Shay and I have done for our last 4 projects. Is we've bought something that's a residential property. We've turned it into a vacation rental and gotten cash flowing. Just a dramatic difference in your return doing it that way versus buying turnkey, which I'm sure everyone watching this knows and gets the idea behind it. But if you're looking, on the Missouri side, again, Arkansas is much different because there's not hardly any restrictions for most of Arkansas, except for on certain city levels. But for Southwest Missouri and the Branson area, Stone County seems to be a little more accepting at the moment. Again, it depends on how it's zoned. So look for something that's rural residential, agricultural, commercial. But then you still have to go, if it's RR1, you still have to go through that permitting process and make sure the board's cool with it and make sure that the neighbors are good with it. So that's still kind of a wild card. But what we advise our clients to do is if they're looking at a property like that, that's on the market, is to make their offer contingent on getting that permit prior to closing. And we have had a lot of success with that over the last 6 months.
Yeah, I agree. I've personally done that before too. I said, hey, if I don't get a permit, then I'm not closing on this house. So,
but 6 months ago, that contingency was really difficult, because everything was selling with multiple offers, cash over asking, and or would take a contingency if they didn't have to, right? Now the market's normalizing, and we're not 5 days on the market anymore. We're 40 days, So,
right.
So we've got 2 deals right now. That are pending contingent on that permit. So it's become a much more acceptable contingency.
Gotcha. Cool. I'll say this, guys, especially my experience as an investor looking to invest in short-term rentals outside of where I'm from and calling a realtor, it is so valuable to have somebody local who knows the rules. It just takes, a lot of that stuff, Ryan, you said, this county, this stuff, I over my head, but
why would you want to know that,
Well, yeah, if I was interested in the area, I try to approach it like, hey, well, maybe I'm potentially interested in Branson, especially after our conversation here. But that tells me that, that market pretty well in terms of the regulations. And that's really what's important when you talk to a realtor, especially if you're going to buy a short-term rental. And so with that being said, a shameless plug for Ryan right here. Email this guy. Well, you can't see my finger. There we go because of the banner. But email this guy, RyanDuffyHomes@gmail.com if you're interested in talking to him further. and because this guy knows what he's talking about. So maybe, I mean, he just made it sound good, but I mean, just listening, I was like, you know what? Yeah, he knows this market well. So last question here for you, Ryan. What are your thoughts on STRs in the resort communities? And then how are the HOA fees? Are they super expensive? Can you still cash flow with those fees?
Yeah, I would say, again, going back to an earlier topic that we touched on for new construction, I think that's still a fantastic opportunity. There's a lot of developments going on. A lot of them at the moment, what's listed is sold out. There's some newer stuff, but overwhelmingly, what we've seen is if you get into it as a new construction product and you're carrying that construction loan to fruition, then you're doing really well. And especially in some of the communities that are starting to pop up now that are a little further away from all the other ones that just got built up, so they're going to have a little more exclusivity. They're going to have, some different amenities. One of them that's coming up has a lazy river that runs through it, which is pretty cool. As far as HOA and COA dues, they're typically, it depends on the resort, but if you've got something that's lakefront, Lakeview, you can expect $300, $450 a month, for your dues. It usually depends on square footage, like $1.15 a square foot, I think is kind of the standard in our area. But they have the potential of doing really, really well, but again, I would caution people when they're looking at products like that. If they're looking at something that's already been flipped a couple of times, it's 2 or 3 years old, it's been sold 2 or 3 times, may not necessarily cash flow at that point. But if you're getting into a new construction or you're getting a good deal, and I'm seeing a big increase in owner finance deals right now too, which can be really helpful for getting your cash on cash, where you want to be. So a lot of good opportunities there still, but I would just really caution people to dig deep into the numbers, look at everything else in the area, how it's doing, and look and see if it's just something different and unique. That's something that Shay and I are really hammering on for our own personal projects. Like we're trying to do stuff that's just completely, off the cuff. We're building a shipping container house, which is just nuts. There's no practice to it, but it looks cool. Right. So stuff like that, and we're working with some people to do some luxury treehouse type things, and so really just doing something to make yourself stand out, and you'll be all right. But yeah, having those resort amenities is huge. A lot of people draw to it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that what you said there about finding properties that aren't necessarily like someone selling it as a turnkey is huge, because you'll pay a premium for that, and that will kill your cash flow as well.
Yeah.
Ryan mentioned here that he's heard of people paying $850 a month for COA dues, so I think that's crazy. So,
you're doing really well to factor that in. And there's a number of different resort communities in our area, and some of them have multiple dues. Some have COA and I forget what else they call them, but some of them do have like multiple sets of dues tagged onto each other. So, and then also another point to make when you're looking at some of these resort communities, a lot of them have mandatory management in place. So another thing, and again, please email me and someone from our team will help you. But if not, if you're working with an agent already, make sure that agent knows to ask the right questions, and make sure that, if you're getting into something that you can self-manage if you want to, because some of these communities that you look at STR Insights and you see what it's doing on paper, gross, it doesn't show that it's got like a 45% management fee associated with it. So, I mean, that could be a deal breaker for a lot of people. I mean, it is for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's that's a huge deal breaker.
Yeah, it's like 55%. It's like why would you even do this unless it's just like a better alternative to a timeshare? Like you just want to break even and you've got a place on the lake you can go to.
Yeah, you just love that area, I guess. So that's interesting. Cool. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for being on here. I learned a lot, especially about that area. Provided a lot of clarity. It also helped me narrow down what are some of those key attributes for an emerging market. And if you joined us late or you missed the kind of the summary of it, I'll send it out in an email to everybody. But if you guys have any questions about Branson, Northwest Arkansas, anything, just reach out to Ryan and his team and put the email there, left it up. Also, if you guys give us a like or subscribe if you're on YouTube, we'd love that to grow the channel. That's really it. So thanks, Ryan, for hopping on here, and thanks everybody else for tuning in. So we'll see you next time.
We'll see you.